Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Greg Olmo with Key Performance Ideas, and I would like to welcome you to our webinar, EPM Automate Tips and Tricks. Today's webinar will be presented by Noah Neal. Noah Neal specializes in the Oracle Hyperion suite of products and is certified in Hyperion Planning, Oracle PBCS, and Essbase. Recognized for his thought leadership by OAUG and OD Tug, this presentation was held as a deep dive session at both Collaborate and Kscope this year. Thank you for presenting today, Noah.
Thank you, Greg, and thank you everyone for attending our webinar today. I'm going to run through the agenda here, key high-level overview. First, we're going to be providing more context around Oracle Cloud and Planning and Budgeting as a Cloud Service, or PBCS. Within the context of PBCS, we're going to look at the product that is EPM Automate. And from there, we're going to explore the EPM Automate commands and a series of several objectives, the first being more around scripting and syntax, the second looking at email notifications, and the third looking at system logs and error handling that can be folded into your automated process. So combining these three objectives, we're then going to zoom out a bit and look at some implications for larger data streams. And lastly, in Objective 5, we're going to put all of it together and really look at how you as a user can set up processes around EPM Automate to minimize maintenance and optimize your daily routines. So let's go ahead and look at the first piece here around Oracle Cloud and PBCS. As you're probably well aware, Oracle Planning and Budgeting as a Cloud Service is really Oracle on-premises Hyperion Planning in the context of Oracle Cloud, and also within the context of Oracle Cloud are several other products as well, including account reconciliation, things like that. But within each of those products, at least most of them, the product that is EPM Automate is available as a utility to support automated processes. So a summary here of what EPM Automate is: command line utility that's implemented on top of the Oracle Cloud REST APIs, and REST stands for Representational State Transfer. So everything that can be done within the context of EPM Automate can actually be done using the REST APIs as well. Looking at this a little bit more here, EPM Automate leverages scripts and as well as the Windows Task Scheduler to perform and automate common business tasks. One would use the Task Scheduler if they want to maybe do something that lights out. And these tasks include importing and exporting metadata, importing and exporting planning application data, refreshing the application, running various different types of business rules, copying data across cubes, uploading and downloading files, and maybe snapshots or backups. You can create scripts and automate the execution through Task Scheduler for Windows. Maybe, for example, to maintain rolling 7-day application backups. You can take advantage of error codes that come with the utility that indicate the status of a specific operation or task. Another key highlight is that you can run the utility both on your local machine or in a server environment. Maybe you need to, for example, upload data. A data file might take a long time, or might cause errors actually depending on the size of the file, and it could actually be easier to just run the upload command through EPM Automate to achieve that goal. The utility is also available through Linux, and you can download it from the PBCS web interface within a matter of minutes. Navigation-wise, for your reference, here's where we would do that in the simplified interface, just in the upper right, and selecting downloads, and from there we can just download it for the OS as needed. Jumping now to specific commands for EPM Automate. There are multiple sets of commands depending on the Oracle Cloud Service that you're using. So in our context, we're going to be talking about PBCS, but you can also see some of the earlier financial consolidation and close, account reconciliation, profitability, and cost management. Several different sets of commands depending on the tool of interest. Commands require service administrator, security role within Oracle Cloud in order to run. So looking at some commands here, you can see that it's pretty straightforward and pretty intuitive, which is very useful in getting up and running quickly. For example, command to log in is for logging in. Downloading a file is download file, and import data is literally import data, one word. So now that we kind of realize that, we can see that that it's pretty simple to just reference these in a script or just go through the command prompt. You can see here just some additional commands as well, and more continue to be released as time goes on. So let's look at these commands in the context of greater scripting. After you download and install EPM Automate utility, you can integrate a variety of scripts and launch the commands through the utility. So, for example, getting more specific here within these examples, using Windows batch scripting and task scheduler to kick off a trigger file, and which in turn would kick off an automated routine. So, for example, a common import of daily actuals data. Clear yesterday's, bring it today's. Run a business rule that aggregates it. Use VB scripting to unzip files that have been exported. So say you have a routine where you're exporting data, maybe it's budget data out of PBCS. You could bring in a VB script to unzip files as well. Use PowerShell scripts to delete old files that were created X days prior. Use VB scripting to send an email containing the batch process log to the FP&A admin after the routine is completed. So that's kind of a lot, but we'll look at some more specifics as far as how we set this up shortly. Let's do that through the context of a business case, of a walkthrough. So this is walkthrough 1, automating your metadata load. So Windows batch scripting in this particular context is the easiest to learn, apply, and get your organization up and running. The first walkthrough involves this metadata load process. So the example process here, it might be used by businesses that frequently change their account hierarchy structure and need to make sure that changes in their source system are also reflected in PBCS on a daily basis. So let's take a look at that. So zooming in further here, we have an account file, account hierarchy, and it's going into the PBCS application. In our case, the application is called Plantastic 1. So the organization added a couple of accounts here, as you can see within their revenue roll-up here, subgroup 1 and subgroup 2 as highlighted. Well, how would we process the automation here? We have this new file. We're kicking off our routine. This is the first. Well, let's begin on the planning side. What do we have to do on the planning side? So we begin by setting up a job in PBCS that can be launched through the automation, and then initiate that whole metadata import process. So planning side, we're going into the home screen here, click to overview, and navigation-wise, you see a button there for import, and we can click that, and from there create an import metadata job. So you can see where do we want the files to go. We want the files to go to the inbox. What do we want it to be called? Account hierarchy file. And then lastly, we can just save it as a job. This is a comma delimited file with a static name. It's static because just the nature of how the system accommodates these files, we just have a static name there. So once we have the job, we're saving it, and this is actually the end of the planning side of setting up this job. So we have our job name, which is import account hierarchy job, which launch manually, through the job console, or in our business case, we want to launch it automatically through EPM Automate. So now we're done with the planning side. Let's get out of planning. Let's look at our server environment here as we continue to build our process. So we want to bring the latest into the cube with automation, scripting, and EPM Automate. So beginning with that, let's take a look at our script organization. And we're just going to start from the very first step and just go forward. So we're creating paths. That's probably the key piece to getting set up with any type of automation routine, making sure that your paths make sense and that they can be easily referenced. So you begin by creating subfolders on the local machine or server environment environment to compartmentalize the scripts based on the function. So we have C automation scripts, and you can see we have job tasks and a variables folder. We also have an input files folder, which has a metadata subfolder, which in our case is where we would post our source file, the account hierarchy file. Within the variables file, we also have a system variable script. Variables allow us to reduce maintenance time and recycle file paths and credentials and more throughout the routine. So what exactly does that mean here? We'll look at that shortly. But first, let's just go into Windows batch scripting briefly, just from a kind of a coding standpoint here. So a few key commands. The set command allows you to define a variable. So pretty straightforward. Set primary path. The primary path is our variable, and it's literally the path where the scripts live. CD is change directory. So if we want to point the system to another file of interest, we could use CD and then change to a different path. We also have call, which allows you to call a specific file. Rem, remark, just a comment. We can build scripts in a text editor like Notepad++. Variables, after they're defined, are referenced with the percentage symbol before and after the variable name. A good time-saving tip is copy-paste, of course, wherever you can. Right-click on folders and use copy address to easily copy it and then paste it into the script. You can schedule batch scripts to run through Windows Task Scheduler, as I mentioned before. And you can also manipulate the date stamp function to bring in files with today's date and the file name and pass the time frame variable values through the scripting. So that's kind of it's a little bit more of a complex point, but if you look at this example here, we have account hierarchy file, and then this notation here looks kind of complex. But basically what that's doing is actually defining the date through the date function. So we have account hierarchy file and then a particular date, 6 digits, .csv, which we could manipulate to, as needed. If we needed to go back 04 for April or something like that, we could do so. So continuing now, we're looking at our example script, just considering that kind of coding, a few second overview there. We're defining our variables. So set utility directory, my username, my password for PBCS, primary path where most of the files live, and then various other variables as well for directory account and an actual file for the account hierarchy. So we continue by using a wrapper script. So a wrapper script is the primary script that governs the majority of the automated tasks and references other scripts, such as a variable script to drive the routine. So what does that look like? Well, you can see it's a lot more lines here. We're going to begin by calling our variables file, and from there, in subsequent steps, we're referencing those variables. So let's break it down a bit further here. Step 1, we're going to call routine variables file. So we're defining those variables, and again, subsequent steps use those variables. So we do that, and then step 2 is that's really where we log in. So the notation there is call EPM Automate once we're pointing to where our EPM Automate directory exists. EPM Automate log in, and then we have our parameters here, which are also variables. And assuming we can log in successfully, we'll jump to step 3. We're actually going to delete yesterday's account hierarchy file because we have the static file name. And then we're going to actually upload today's file. And then once it's uploaded, we can actually reference that job that we created a few slides ago to bring the file into the cube. Lastly, we log out, as simple as EPM Automate log out. So where do we go from here? So launching the routine. There's multiple methods to launch. Method 1, probably the most obvious, just simply double-clicking the script that kicks off the routine. In this case, it's the wrapper script, and the advantage is pretty convenient, but the disadvantage is that it's difficult to monitor component processes and it's difficult to see errors, and that might lead to increased troubleshooting time. So how would we process the outcomes after we've launched the routine? Again, maybe it's just as simple as checking a PBCS for the expected outcome. Did you automate a data load? Check to see if the data is there in SmartView. Did you bring in new members? Check to see if the new members are there through the dimension editor. It's really a one-stop method. So did it work or didn't it? The disadvantage is, again, difficult to monitor those component processes that are happening in the background. Also difficult to see errors, and again, that means greater time. So how do we widen the scope a little bit? How do we gain more control over what's happening? That folds into Objective 2, leveraging email notifications. So you can integrate email notification functionality into automated routines to help you monitor processes and troubleshoot. So method 1 to do this, some type of custom scripting. VB scripting may be an email server, send success failure notifications following the completion of the routine. Attach a batch process log file for sending to the recipients. And we could have a success or failure path dictated by the EPM Automate exit codes, and we'll be going into those in Objective 3. Advantages, you can receive a lot of detail. You can write custom lines to the batch process log. We'll be talking about that as well. Also, just having that ability to customize. But the disadvantages are that it might take a significant amount of programming knowledge to set up, and more specifications, more requirements that could lead to more challenges in the way of maintenance. So what I propose is in Method 2, leverage PBCS system email notification capabilities. Receive an email notification following each job console step. So, for example, import metadata job runs, you get an email. Refresh the cube runs, you get an email, etc. Alternatively, you could set up business rules, like a dummy business rule or a series of dummy business rules that have no function other than to kick off an email notification. So maybe at the end of the routine, you have an if-then type of logic. You don't receive any news, that means that it went through. Or there was an error, that dummy business rule goes through. It kicks off an email notification letting you know of the failure. Or you could do additional if-then logic to send out notifications depending on a series of conditions. Setup could be done through a few methods there. And you can utilize email software forwarding to send out specific notifications to specific recipients. So maybe finance team gets only one notification letting them know that the routine is completed. Maybe you as the admin receive multiple notifications telling you of each step along the path. This sounds maybe a little bit complicated, but it's actually very easy to set up and manage. And you're working with tools that you've already worked with. Just a few clicks here and there, and you're ready to go. The disadvantage is the limited ability to customize. So let's extend the example from walkthrough 1 and look more at email notifications here. Assume you're a system admin who's responsible for maintaining the automation that imports that account hierarchy into the Plantastic 1 application. You want to be notified of through email of the status. So begin by logging into the PBCS web interface, application settings, and then just put in your email address and click Save. And that's it. You're ready to go. So you would receive, if you're launching a job through the job console, an email notification pertaining to the job process outcome, and the same occurs when you're launching jobs through the automation. So executing the same automation script by double-clicking again. Let's look at a specific piece of that script, so only one part of a script associated with import metadata. which is the actual import metadata command. But really, it has two steps. It has the refresh step as well. So for the first step, we receive the notification after completion, letting us know that that import metadata job was successful. And you can see there's pretty useful information in this email notification, including, start time and end time, what the job is called, who ran it. In my particular example here, the from and to are the same because I'm the one who is the designated recipient and also the one who is effectively logging in through the script to run the automated routine. It's my username in both places, and that's why the from and to are the same. So looking at the second step as well, similar type of a notion. The refresh went through. It's still in the middle. The refresh was complete. Pretty useful information that lets us save time and supports method 2. This is being method 2 as opposed to method 1 for processing the outcome of routines. What if there was an error? So this is kind of a common one. Those who have been around Hyperion for a while, I'm sure are familiar with issues that come from duplication. So if you look at here, this example, the highlighted subgroup, member 1, revenue source A used twice. We receive a familiar failure email notification here. Member name and alias must be unique among siblings. One or more child jobs have failed. So I could go in and make one of them unique and try again and should get a successful notification. So that's notifications. Let's expand on this further. Let's look at system logs and error handling. EPM Automate produces multiple exit codes, so 1, 6, 9, etc., depending on the outcome of the job. So, for example, exit code 1 could be for a number of reasons. The command failed to execute, resource does not exist, etc. They reveal insight into the status of a particular job console job and or EPM Automate related operation. EPM Automate automatically each failed execution, but alternatively, we can do customization pretty easily within the context of our script, and that's really what we're going to be talking about in the upcoming slides here. To do so is surprisingly easy and effective. So let's go back to our folders and our scripts and take a look at the screenshot here. So looking at our previous walkthroughs, we are going to add another subfolder called Automation Routine Logs. And that's really where we're going to store process logs. So let's return to the variables file and add variables to accommodate the logs. So automation log path is the folder where the logs will live. And then we have an automation log file name. And to integrate logging into the script, we just have to add these 3 pieces of code logic here. So let's look at that. This is from several slides back. Echo, then some words, and then 2 arrows. That's the first piece. Step 1 on the previous slide. Echo on allows you to see each line of script code through the command prompt. And it can also be turned off. It's useful for troubleshooting purposes. So echo, and then some words, the words that we would want to write to the log file, and then 2 arrows is actually going to write the words to a particular line. Write the particular line here to the file. So in the example above, we're writing the statement, logging into the environment to the particular file. That's the key piece. So if we go to the next piece, which is this logic here, if error level is not equal to 0, go to a failure point. Error level is actually some reserved code there. It implies that an EPM Automate exit code. So logic here is if the exit code is not equal to 0, 0 implying no error, go to failure point and take next steps. So in our example, failure point is at the end of the script. You don't have to call it failure point. You can call it error point. You can call it really whatever you want. The main piece is just having the colon and then the names relating to the go-to functionality. So we're going to failure point, and if an exit code occurred during the previous step, the processing would go to failure point, at which point the line after echo, which is here, is printed to the log. So in this case, it's saying, there's an error, we went to failure point, and we're writing to the log, automation processes were unsuccessful, investigate the error code with the number, and then insert the number, at which point the admin can go in and look at that log and troubleshoot as they would need to. So let's assume the mistake in the import file, as we talked about in walkthrough 2. Let's assume that we didn't know about that error, went ahead and ran it by double-clicking. But now we have our more stated script routine. We can go back to our logs file and go and actually visualize the log as it after it writes to the file, and then we get the same error notification. So it's letting us know, okay, the deleted the old file successfully, we uploaded the new file successfully, but we have an error, and that's that duplication issue. So you can see that lines can be coded to the log with echo. Those that we had designated were, in fact, written to the log. EPM Automate steps were written to the log as well, so delete file. And then at the end of the log, we're told to investigate EPM At1 and also given more detail on that duplication. So you can see it's pretty powerful information that allows us to save time. And this is another method that can supplement our process along with the email notifications, which is communicating the same detail. So we can also take steps to minimize human intervention in the system that is taking place while that automation is running. So, for example, assume an automated routine that's running multiple times during a business day. The routine was built to import a dimension hierarchy multiple times a day. The client, or the customer rather, really wants to ensure that they're aligned with their source system as frequently as they can, maintain updates in both with minimal lag. But users are using the system during the day as well. So if they were to be submitting data through an ad hoc grid or form, something like that, at the same time the automation step to refresh the cube occurs, it could cause an error conveying that there are other users in the system. Again, those who've been around Hyperion and Essbase for a long time, I'm sure have seen this error. We can integrate logic into our scripting, though, to have the refresh step kick off again, so maybe it's multiple times. If it's a failure due to that, what would that look like? Well, here's an example here. We can use that go-to logic that we discussed earlier. If it fails, go to refresh again and try to refresh the cube again. If that fails, go to refresh B. So maybe, very simple logic there to resolve that issue. Another alternative, could be a better alternative here, is to actually kick users out of the system prior to running the routine. And a quick way to do that is to customize a refresh job in PBCS. And you can see here with that refresh job, we have the option to log off all users and stop all active requests. And we could just throw that into the beginning of the script. So refresh the cube, automation, kickoff refresh is a refresh job. And it will kick users out of the system prior to taking subsequent steps. So we talked about the scripting, we talked about the commands, we talked about controls. Let's look at some implications for data streams here. So that we had a very small routine. So we're essentially uploading a metadata file, and we're importing our latest hierarchy in the cube. What are the implications if we extend the scripting and the controls? We can do more. We can import metadata. We can back up the application snapshot. We can move files around. We can archive files, etc. And the primary constraints just become time allowance and technical logic and the commands available. So let's look at the date stamp notion proposed earlier. So, for example, time frame variables we use all the time in planning, S-base, substitution variables, runtime prompt variables, etc. Let's assume an automated daily routine where metadata is loaded, and we're also clearing yesterday's MTD actuals. We're loading today's, and then we're aggregating to capture the latest data. Well, we can process files that delineate the time frame within the file name. So, for example, if a variable was used for the data file name, it could look like this below. So we have like a wildcard symbol here and the date function, and we could process this in a dynamic fashion. So this coding represents components of the data function that we discussed earlier. For example, for today, looking at the server date, it could be April 6th, 17. The asterisk represents a wildcard, which we can pass various values through. So, for example, we're processing April 17, which is necessary for data management. As you know, it's, for example, period-year, APR-17. Let's pass through 0417 in this segment here. So, for example, today's might be 4.6. We're loading to 4.17. Tomorrow's might be 4.7. It's in the date stamp, but again, we're still loading to 4.17. But what about in May? It's 5.1, 5.17. It all depends. You could be in current month and load prior month if you could communicate this value through the file name. Let's take a look at the scripting for deciphering that information. For example, it could look like this here. So we could isolate components of that file name. So for 4.17, just saying to capture the variable that is variable value that is 8 characters in from the left and over 2. That's all that this is saying here to bring us the value that is 0.4, and we could just communicate that here through data load month as a variable name. We can then go ahead and manipulate that. We can convert it into APR, pass it through runtime prompts, concatenate it with 17 for data management, whatever we need to do. So just a little bit more of the complexities. Kind of a wrap-up in Objective 5. We can combine the previously mentioned techniques to optimize our routines. There's multiple means to run the automation that we discussed. There's multiple means to review the results. There's multiple controls to minimize the errors. And we can do many tasks through using multiple scripts we discussed as well. And to do so, we would just continue the wrapper script. So after we walk through one, we bring in the metadata, then maybe we're bringing in the data, and in so doing, we shouldn't have any kickouts because we're bringing in the latest metadata. So let's just do a little bit of contrast here, the manual steps versus automation, the amount of time it took to take the manual steps to walk through 5 and to resolve errors might have been a double-digit number of minutes, but the amount of time it took for automated steps to do the same thing, far less than that, maybe none if it's scheduled, and we can do something else with our time after kicking off the routine. You can really see the power of EPM Automate, automating jobs in one routine on a daily basis. So in multiple business cases, you can see how useful the scripting processes can be. So for example, if you had to run a file or multiple files through data management to capture different data points, this is much more easily done through automation than several passes through data management clicks. So just wrapping it up further, conclusions in the path forward. EPM Automate improves efficiency. It makes running PBCS job tasks a lot easier. It is effective scripting and process organization is the key to save time on troubleshooting. And there's a great many benefits to taking measures to optimize your automation processes, as we talked about, the folders, the scripting, etc., the logging, and then enhancing your scripting to accommodate the logs and archiving, things like that. There are various exciting updates. Making the application back up more easily was part of the February 17 update, what will happen in the future will maybe a streamlined path for downloading the data management process detailed log through EPM Automate, which could communicate kickouts without the user having to go in, without the admin rather having to go in and look for that. But regardless, more is sure to come, and be sure to review the latest updates from Oracle Cloud when they're announced. Thank you again for attending my presentation. We hope you learned valuable information from it, and please feel free to reach out if you have any questions.
Thank you, Noah, and thank you all for joining today for the webinar EPM Automate Tips and Tricks. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact us. Noah's and my information are on the screen. Thank you again for joining us, and have a great day.